Yo guys, it's Thomas Apologia, and today we're actually going to be responding to an argument against the Trinity which isn't stupid. It's actually like a somewhat thought out argument. And it's going to be a philosophical objection to the Trinity today. So stay tuned. Okay guys, so let's give the argument which has been used here, and it's getting quite popular, this argument. So what is it? So I'll read the syllogism. Premise 1. An existence is either necessarily true or contingently true in its existing, which is the law of excluded middle. Premise 2. If something cannot be shown to entail a contradiction when denied, it cannot be necessary. Premise 3. If something is contingently true, then it cannot be essentially ascribed to a necessary truth. Premise 4, the Trinity cannot be shown to be true by otherwise contradiction resulting. So conclusion, the Trinity is possibly false and impossibly ascribed to a necessary truth. So does this argument refute the Trinity? Is the Trinity possibly false and can't be ascribed to a necessary truth? Well, let's find out. Okay, let's get to the problems of this argument. So for starters, premise 1 is referring to metaphysical necessity, and so it seems to be the conclusion. However, premise 2 and other areas of the argument seem to be focusing more on logical necessity. And thus, the creator of the argument seems to be equivocating on the term necessary. And here's why. So, for example, in premise 2, the creator is saying that a truth can only be said to be necessary insofar as denying it entails a contradiction. But the type of necessity which is being talked about here would be a type of logical necessity. And a logical necessity is just going to be something by which, if you deny it, a contradiction is going to result. So it's necessarily true. For example, the laws of logic. If you denied the laws of logic, contradictions would result. So necessarily, the laws of logic are true and they're going to ground reality, right? However, the problem is that in his other premises, he seems to be talking about metaphysical necessity. Now, what is metaphysical necessity? Metaphysical necessity, which is what the Christians are ascribing to God when we say that he is a Trinity and that he exists necessarily as a Trinity, is going to be the type of necessity which talks about a thing existing in all possible worlds. So, for example, a Christian would say, God is a Trinity in all possible worlds. However, that doesn't mean the Christian is saying that denying the Trinity entails a contradiction in the natural logic of man. That doesn't have to be what the Christian is saying whatsoever. So the creator of the argument is conflating between the two types of necessity. But when I say God exists necessarily, and if you deny he exists, it results in a contradiction, then I'm talking about a logical type of necessity. But when I'm talking about metaphysical necessity, I'm saying that the being of God is necessary and exists in all possible worlds. So, how can we know this? How can we know that he's conflating between the two types of necessity and that they should be really different? Well, it's because metaphysical necessity is going to be more broad than logical necessity. So, for example, there may be more things which can be possibly said to be necessarily true then there can be things which can be proven to be necessarily true insofar as if you deny it, it entails a contradiction. So let me explain, right? The Islamic conception of God, or the Christian conception of God, or the Jewish conception of God, or even the conception of God that the creator of this video ascribes to, if you denied that conception of God but held to a slightly different one, it wouldn't entail a contradiction. It wouldn't mean that you couldn't justify reality. But does that mean that their conception of God is any less necessary? No, because when those people say that God is necessary, what they mean is that God is necessarily existing. He is metaphysically necessary, right? That's what they mean by that. But this argument would seem to be able to show that all kinds of things which are metaphysically necessary truths, or said to be that at least by certain believers of those truths, couldn't be necessary truth and may possibly be false. And the obvious problem with that is that like it could serve as like a syllogism against one, the creator of this video's idea of reality, and yeah, it just conflates between metaphysical and logical necessity. So as we said earlier, the Jewish conception of God, Christian conception, Muslim conception, the creator's conception, right, of God is all metaphysically necessary. But if you denied any of those conceptions, you could still justify truth, right? Which means that the argument would apply against them. So I could reverse the argument for a Unitarian God. I could say that, okay, a Unitarian God isn't necessarily true and is possibly false. And the reason why is because no contradiction is generated in denying the existence of said God. And then like the creator of this is going to be like, hang on, that's not true. Why? Well, it's going to be not true because you're conflating between the types of necessity here. That's why the argument isn't going to run through as an actual argument against like the Unitarian conception of God. And if you think that you can prove that it is logically necessary that God is Unitarian and that denying this results in a contradiction, why start with this argument in the first place, right? Because this argument is just a long form of getting towards this objection, right? So in the first place, you could have just started off by saying, well, God is necessarily Unitarian, logically speaking at least, and here's an argument for why. And if you have that argument, there's no point of even needing this one because that argument would clearly be a better one. But because we know that no such argument exists, and we know that the creator of this argument is conflating his terms of necessity, we can know that the argument is false and does not work against the Trinity.